What is up, guys? Welcome to the video. This is just a very quick, well, relatively quick video that I wanted to make. I am working, as maybe a few of you know, on a more extensive, in-depth charts, all that kind of stuff, unit analysis. And this is one of my matches here that I have set up so I can see both sides, see what the enemy sees what I, have my country and all that, playing as a US. This is just for demonstration purposes, private match. But anyway, I thought it would be, it's been taking a while, a lot longer, probably like a year longer than I expected to really make the video that I've been wanting to make. And I have some friends and a lot of you who I play with who asked me questions, and so I figured I would just get on, and instead of trying to do anything super structured and all professional, I would just try to put out as much information as I can. I apologize. I'm sure that I am going to miss quite a few things, and so for anybody in the comments below can definitely put out some advice or maybe even corrections if I make a mistake. I do have a decent amount of time in this game. I think I've been playing for almost 2 years now. I just actually finished a match that had been going on for 368 days, I believe. So, or no, sorry, 358 days. So it was like, yeah, not quite a year. So yeah, I would say I have a decent amount, but there's definitely more professional players than me as well. Anyway, let's go ahead and jump right into it. So, like I said, it's going to be a little bit chaotic. I'm just trying to put out as much info as I can as quickly as possible, so you have to forgive me. So let's go ahead and start with what do you do when you get into a match in the first place. So first of all, you want to make sure you kind of have an idea of what you want to do, right? So your strategy. Now, you might have to play a few rounds before you know for sure. The advantages to picking certain countries and certain doctrines. There are 3 different doctrines in the game. If I hadn't said this already, this video is kind of geared towards brand new players, so forgive me for any of you that are a little bit more seasoned or have more experience. But anyway, there's 3 basic doctrines. You have the Western, European, and something else, I forget. Basically the same. All it means is you have different reskin units, so like maybe your fighters are MiGs if you're Russia versus F-18s or whatever, or F-16s on if you're Western. And then it also makes a little bit of a difference because some countries you can get certain units early, but as far as I can tell, pretty much all the units are pretty balanced. Like if you have special forces as a US versus special forces of Russia, same stats. The only difference is you might be able to get one a little bit sooner than the other. Speaking of which, let's jump right into the research. So everything is regulated by days. Now, bear in mind, this is going off of the 1X vanilla. So this is the very base vanilla, like the default game version, and honestly my favorite version to play since I'm a busy person. But yeah, everything is separated into days. So day 1, you can only unlock day 1 units, right? As you go forward, or as you continue into the match, all the way up to around day, I think 31, 32 is around pretty much where the last units available. And obviously you can go up to, like I said, a year, even more if you wanted to. But usually around day 31 or so, you can basically unlock any units you want. That being said, this game is definitely about resources, and there is no way, even in that match where I played for a year, granted I wasn't on constantly and pushing it all the time, but it took a good part of that. I would say it's probably going to take you at least 3 or 4, 5 months if you do like a private match and you want to try to max them all out, to really max everything out. I'm sure you could do a little bit quicker if you use some gold and stuff like that, but yeah. That being said, you have to pick your specialty. Now, I'm going to save all the details about exactly what units are, how they compare to each other, all that kind of stuff. I will say that most people go for the basic motorized infantry, which is decent. I prefer the mechanized infantry. They are way better on defense, and the biggest reason, as an active player, I should have also mentioned this as well. This video is geared for active players, people who get on at least 2 or 3 times a day, and want to actually, play fairly active. And by active, I mean, you could get on 3 or 4 times a day, but you have 10 matches, and so you're still not really paying attention. So when I say active, I mean someone who generally doesn't play more than 3 or 4 matches at a time. They get on 2 or 3 times a day. They actually care about the match. They're not just going to abandon it. So my strategy and a lot of what I'm going to show you is kind of geared towards the active player. So just keep that in mind. But mechanized infantry, in my opinion, are the best for a few different reasons. Their defense, well, we'll go into it. Might as well explain it while I'm doing this. But if you go in here, when I do my main video, I'll be showing it on mobile too. But anyway, if you go in here, there are 2 different types of stats, pretty much for every single unit. And once you wrap your head around this, which is it's not difficult, it'll definitely, it'll definitely help you understand the game a lot more. So you have your attack and your defense ratings. So you could have a really awesome, unit that has amazing attack, and then you leave it sitting in a city, right? And another unit comes up to attack it, like maybe while you're offline or whatever. And if it has really, shitty defense stats, it's still not going to do very good. You could have the best attack stats, or vice versa. If you have really good defense, but you're trying to push, then only your attack stats, will count, right? So just something to know. There is a difference here, something to look for. The reason I like mechanized infantry is basically the big reason to have infantry is because they're the only unit types that can take and hold territories and cities, right? So if I'm going to have a slow-moving, infantry unit, because I tend to gravitate more towards highly mobile, like Air Force, stuff like that, that as an active player I can implement way better and more deadly. If I'm going to have infantry, I prefer the mechanized infantry because they have better defensive stats. They're just buffed. They're actually pretty good against aircraft as well. Like if you look at this maxed out mechanized infantry, right? He has against aircraft, so 3.1, so that's one single unit, right? You can stack them up to 10. 10 for infantry, pretty much 5 for everything else. Actually, that's kind of correct. I'll go into that more later with the stacking. But anyway, they have pretty good defense against fixed wing and rotary. So there are there's different types of unit attacks and defenses. I'll go into this a little bit more when I talk about like missiles and aircraft and all that kind of stuff, how they really work together. But for now, as you can see, they have really good defense. Now they don't have an attack, which means obviously they don't have any AA equipment, anti-aircraft, rocket launchers or anything like that with them. I'm pretty sure none of the infantry do. So they have a really good stat on there, and they're better on defense, right? So these are my defensive units, the ones I move into a city to hold it or defend my homeland cities. They're really good against armor, so heavier or the hard targets, I guess you'd call them. So they're really good against those, which this allows me to pretty much ignore the expensive tanks. I hardly ever build tanks. I know a lot of people swear by them. Usually people are, less active. But a lot of times I find, or back in the days when I started playing and I was using tanks, they're just so slow. They, you can hardly ever get them where you need them in time. They take up so much resources. They're just, every unit that you have, minus the missiles and supplies, take up resources every day. So if you have let's say you have a really good economy, and you're up here, you're making a whole bunch of resources every day, but you have a huge ass army of tanks and infantry, then you're pretty much negating all that awesome economy, because all those units you have. So basically my goal is, over the last year, has been strategizing to find the best way to defend and attack using the minimal amount of units possible. You know, which obviously means highly mobile. It means building airports in pretty much, you know, definitely every homeland city and anywhere you need to go. Airports are very important. And airports, well, I'll go over that when I go over buildings, but airports are good. So yeah, so that's a little bit about units. Let's go ahead and go over a few. So obviously you got the basic motorized. Oh, another thing too, I almost forgot about these. And sorry, once again, this is not structured, so I'm rambling. But you can deploy, I'm used to the mobile version, so it's a little bit difficult for me to find everything I need here. But having supplies, these, I'll go up here, exit out. Whoops, didn't mean to do that. So having these right here, supplies or deployable gear, allows you to deploy drones and a few other things, which is really cool. You know, in the time of, like, if you have a, let's say you only have 2 infantry units, like in this case of mechanized infantry, and you get attacked and they're starting to overwhelm you, you can deploy, or actually correct, I think you have to wait till you're not being, so you have to see them first. I'll have to double check on that, but either way, you can deploy like drones, UAVs, to help you out. They even have some radar. Not very good, but it's, you know, definitely better than what you got as infantry. And yeah, they definitely can help you out. Or special forces are able to deploy drones as well. Really cool. Basically, what we call a force multiplier in the military. Being able to pull that out whenever you need it, but, you know, not having it out taking up resources is very, very valuable. It kind of goes along with missiles as well, but we'll go over that later. Alright, so back to the units. So basically when I play, my primary focus is mechanized infantry, because you do need one solid backbone, like, ground unit. And the problem is, if you go any armored unit, they're, you know, they definitely have their uses and they can be very, very useful, but they can't take and hold territory. So you'll always have to do an infantry unit, and I would rather just have 1 or 2 infantry units, focus on those with some air, and then eventually, you know, when I've done my research on those, then I can, you know, come in and maybe get an armored fighting vehicle or whatever. The biggest ones I usually go with are mechanized infantry and airborne infantry. Now, the nice thing about airborne infantry is I think, maybe it'd just be Western, but you can get them day 1 for Western anyway. You don't need to. Now, I generally try to max them out, but you don't need to. Literally, the usefulness of these things are basically in the fact that they are airborne infantry and they're mobile. So you can have have an airport. Let's see. I think I have some over here. Where did I put them? Right. Okay. Here we go. So those are my mechanized infantry. Okay. Here we go. So airborne infantry. I hate how the computer does this, where I got to bring all this down. But I can go and deselect all this. And let's say I want to take 5. Whatever. 4. I can do, in this whole circle, because all these airports that I have, I can deploy them relatively quickly. Obviously nothing is quick in this game, but compared to basically any other unit, I can get places extremely fast where needed. The downside to airborne, though, is if let's say I deploy here, right? So they're boarding up, getting ready to take off. Once I get here, I have to jump back. If I lose the ability to jump, or to airborne, for lack of better terms, somewhere, they are extremely, extremely slow compared to other infantry. So, whereas, I know it's not exact, but for example, regular infantry takes, I don't know, 3-4 hours to get from this tip all the way over to here. Airborne might take 10 hours. They're very slow. So, but as long as you're jumping, you're good. So the way I play, and I play actively, airports are very important, and I hardly ever operate out of the reach of my air cover and an airport. So that's usually not an issue, and it's very, very effective tool. There are a lot of places The way I look at it is whenever you're picking your units, you're basically picking the tools for your toolkit, or the weapons for whatever you want to call it. You're picking your abilities to be able to maneuver, outplay other players, and most players will go for the basic infantry with tanks, which very limits them, because you can only with basic infantry and tanks and most ground units, you can only enter through ports, which most ports are only on cities. There are some ports for territories as well. Marines are exception; they can go on land without a port, but there's downsides to them as well. So airborne infantry, in my opinion, what I usually do is early game, I will only research first level, because honestly, them being maxed out is not the big reason for having them. Like, their stats are not the big reason. It's just for that ability, and just having some cheap, well, relatively cheap units that you can have that ability to use is very, very powerful. Especially depending on which country. We'll go over that a little bit more here soon. So basically, usually what I do is I get mechanized infantry, airborne units, and then a little later on, if you can, depending on the situation, I might get special forces. Special forces, they're the one type of unit that can't actually take and hold territory, but they are stealth. So you can literally take them into another person's country, and unless they have stealth revealing technology, they will not actually be able to see them. And even if they do, you don't declare war. You can, they have to. It's only later till the game till people can get that anyway. So yeah, especially early to mid game, they can be very powerful in certain circumstances. Unfortunately, they can't take territory, so that you have to use them in a specific situation. All right, so moving on. I already wasted probably a lot of time on that. I'll just say real quick. So I don't hardly ever touch tank destroyers, main battle tanks, amphibious combat vehicles, or recon vehicles, simply because there's better recon units. And then sometimes I get to armored fighting vehicles for a few different reasons. So if you go up to, and I always look at the backs for units, because you got to know what the potential is before you start a tree. Because obviously, if you decide to hop trees mid 1 week in, mid match, you wasted all those resources. Well, maybe not wasted, but you definitely lost a lot of potential. So if we go to the far here, so you can deploy. So you can deploy UAVs. They're highly mobile, so these things can actually get airlifted, versus like the tanks. You have to get pretty high level tanks before they can get airlifted, versus I think these can get airlifted at level 4, I want to say. Which is still a little, yeah, airlifted there. Yeah. Which is still, a little bit weight, but definitely not near as far as tanks. And honestly, my air and my mechanized infantry is better against, armor. So honestly, it's not a big, these are a perfect complement to mechanized infantry, because these are a little bit better against soft targets or infantry units, and these are better against hard targets, but I already have hard target specialized units. Anyway, moving on. I usually go, or at least I've only recently started after a lot of testing and stuff, but I mainly go for the towed infantry or artillery for a few different reasons, but primarily because they are air assault, so they can jump with like my airborne units. They are cheap. They are the lowest tier of artillery, but they're cheap. They're highly mobile. You can air assault with them. Yeah, they're just, compared to these others, like in very specialized situations, I might go for the multiple rocket launcher, but generally that's not something I even consider. This one's okay. This one's pretty good. Usually later in the game I'll start doing mobile SAM launchers. These can also be air assault. Mobile radar. Now this touches on a subject that is huge, that most people ignore, but is intel, especially as an active player. Now obviously if you're not active, you can pretty much skip this entire next section I'm going to talk about. But as an active player, intel and information is everything in this game. Like, you can, I don't know how many games I've won, and people I've taken over simply because I've run, like, knowing where the enemy is, when they're coming, when they're moving, especially if you're an island nation, like if you're Australia, Japan, any of those countries, you know, where people have to cross the water to get to you. Crossing the water in this game is the most vulnerable, like, stage of a invasion. Anytime that you cross the water in this game, unless you have ships with your units and everything, which most people don't do, your units are pretty much helpless. Just sitting ducks, which is perfect if you are defending and you have air support. Especially, you can just pick them off. I've taken out entire, you know, nations trying to invade me without losing one single unit, simply because they throw them at me, and I can just, once again, as long as you're active and you can see, you know, you see them in time, then you can pick them off. The reason the strategy doesn't work for, you know, Air Force and picking them off in the water doesn't work for a lot of people is because they only get on maybe every other day or once a day, or they have 12 matches, so they're not really paying attention. Alright, so once again, mobile radar, literally one of my best. I mean, this is one of the first, or maybe not first, but definitely like second, third thing I get. This is an amazing tool, and there are some other radars. We'll go show them off in a little bit. But the reason I always go with mobile radar is they're the most like general purpose, right? So some of the other radars are good, but they're very specialized. Like they only hit either, you know, fixed wing or aircraft or ground units, blah blah blah. Mobile radar pretty much hits everything. So if you have one of these up, you know, you pretty, other than like, you know, subs, obviously, you can pretty much detect anything that's coming at you. And if you have them maxed out, you can actually even detect stealth. Or not detect necessarily, but you can see stealth within the sight range. So what I usually do, which is a really cool tool, is basically I'll run one of these in a stack. So if I have a, you know, a large stack of you know, infantry or whatever that I'm going into a country, basically any major operation where I'm using ground units, I will always run a mobile radar in that stack, because it gives me all the intel I need. So for example, now this is, I just bunched up all these units here, so it's not the best example, but let's just say this was the stack I was using to invade, you know, Cuba here, and I hadn't taken it already. What this allows me to do is, as I move in, I can see enemy air force coming, you know, airplanes coming in to attack me. I can see enemy ground units, you know, pings, because there's different color pings for different types of units. I can see, you know, maybe ships moving in. I can detect all that in advance, in time for me to scramble, well, you know, whatever jets I need. You know, like, you know, for example, if I had, you know, my aircraft carrier group over here, I could scramble, you know, my air power, what I needed to basically take care of the threat before it even hits my ground units. So it's a very, very powerful tool. Even if, you know, even if you run like tanks and stuff, I would pretty much anytime you run a large ground stack, I would always have a mobile radar if you're an active player. Once again, doesn't really do you any good if you're not even on to look at and see the intel coming into you. Alright, so moving on. Helicopters, I'm not going to go too much on them, but they're good early game, like early game, and in very specific situations. My general take is the only ones I actually usually ever get is the ASW helicopters for my naval fleet. Sorry, so my aircraft carrier strike groups and all that stuff, because this allows me, they're a better option in my opinion to destroyers for anti-submarine, because submarines can't even hit these, so you can just sit there and pound at them all day, and they're cheaper. It allows me not to have to waste resources on destroyers. So yeah. Plus, you know, they're more versatile in a lot of ways. Obviously, destroyers can be good, and you know, I know a lot of people swear by them, and only have destroyers, period. And I'll go over that probably in another video. But anyway, you know, the other two are okay. Like I said, early game, like if I'm playing a small country like Israel and I need something that can, you know, hit decently hard and range isn't an option or a big factor, like Israel, then I might get, you know, a level 1 attack chopper or whatever. But these things are quickly outclassed for a few different reasons. Primarily range, but then a lot of units do more damage to helicopters and like in defense damage. So in general, once you get up to like mid to late game, a lot of enemy stacks will pretty much just decimate your helicopters if you try to attack. And they do not have, unless you get, yeah, in general, they do not have missile hardpoints. So you can't attach cruise missiles to them. So basically, anytime you need to fly into a place with anti-aircraft, or anytime where the enemy's trying to shoot you down, you have no way of triggering the enemy AA before you enter an airspace. And so they're not very useful. I would never base my entire strategy around helicopters, but early game they can be good. The one nice thing is all three of these helicopters can go on aircraft carriers. So you know, if you decide to get something early game, maybe level up 1 or 2 levels and just use it for, you know, the first 7 days or whatever, and then throw it onto your aircraft carrier until you get more or better aircraft to replace it. You know, that's not a bad strategy. Moving on to aircraft, my personal favorite. So all I'll say, I know there's a whole big debate, and once again, I know a lot of what I'm saying is up for debate, and there'll be a lot of different people disagreeing with me, but you basically have two different types of fighters, right? You have your air superiority, can't speak today, and you have your strike fighters. Now, I am not saying the air superiority fighters are bad. They are great. And when you have a stack of these bad boys up in the air, like basically nothing can touch you, because unless you're like, you know, actively attacking or moving over enemy territory and you have a really good stack of AA. But if you have these over your city, even like the naval version, which is not even as good as the land version as far as just pure attack and defense stats wise, will do 90, which will pretty much decimate any stack that's sent against you. So no matter what, if the enemy tries to take it out, they're going to lose like, you know, 3 or 4 easily, you know, half their stack of planes. And so for most players, they're not going to take that, you know, that risk. So air superiority planes, they can be great, but the reason I don't usually go with these guys is because they don't have much use, right? Like, they're just, you know, the whole reason for air support is to be able to take out ground, like support your ground troops, at least in my opinion. Very, very, very out of the, I don't know, 50, well, probably more than that, but I'll say 50 matches or whatever I played. I think only 1 or 2 of them have I ever ran into where somebody actually had really good, like, air support, where I had to really, like, and they actually were active. So that's another thing too. There are a lot of people, or I shouldn't say a lot, but there's most of the time when you run across, the few times that you run across someone who plays air and has actually, you know, good fighters, they're not really active, and you can play around them so easily. You can bait them, and I'll go into some of the tactics, but the only time these are really deadly is when you have a super highly active player who's experienced and then he has these maxed out. Then yes, they can be deadly, but the times that happens is very, very rare. Also, I will say that, so you have a stealth version of each at mid-level where you can basically hook off, and these things are basically better if you're only going land. Like, if you're not worried about the naval variant, which I failed to say, but the second line here is a naval variant that goes on aircraft carriers, which is always what I choose. If you're not worried about that, if you're just trying to get aircraft, like, you know, regular runways on land, airports and all that, I would always go stealth. Now, I know they're a little bit more expensive, but these things have basically better stats than your maxed out, you know, over here. They're stealth, which is so useful, which, you know, means the enemy can't see them, generally, unless, like I said, they have really high level radar and all that stuff. And even then, they're very limited. So I would definitely, if you're only planning on going this route, you're not worried about the naval, maybe you're landlocked, maybe you're playing Germany or something like that, I would never just go up, unless for some reason you need a lot of planes and you just, yeah, had to go cheap, I guess. But I would always go stealth. So where I fight over usually is, you know, should I select stealth? Usually naval, in my opinion, wins the day because they're just better against all around, like naval in general. Whether it comes to AWACS, like the radar systems or the aircraft, naval is pretty much always better, more well-rounded. It's not the way to say it, but better rounded. Like they are good against ships. Well, relatively, they're a lot better, put it that way, so you can actually do damage. So, for example, if I have a regular strike aircraft, right, pretty much maxed out, we'll just go to maxed out here. He does only 4 damage, attack damage against ships, right, which is pretty pathetic. And he does 9, so soft targets, hard targets, infantry, armor, and then 6, 7. So that's a maxed out strike aircraft, just normal. A naval variant, which is just slightly more expensive, gets the same attack, or like here, right? Same defense against aircraft. I forget if that's the same, but it's, you know, not bad. And then it gets 9, so that's that's 5 more points of damage. And it's just nice having all these the same, like 40. So you know a stack of 5 is 45, 45, 45. And then if you have an officer with them, you can get like over 50. But it's just, yeah, the naval variants, in my opinion, if you plan on going aircraft, just get, I mean, unless there's no way you're going to get Navy, you know, which you pretty much have to have Navy eventually in a game if you plan on winning. Like, I mean, you can win without it, but Navy is very, very useful. Yeah. Anyway, enough about that. We'll move on. Let's see, what else am I going to say? Oh, UAV drones. So UAVs are extremely useful. Now, once you get to these highest level ones, you can put them on aircraft carriers. The way I look at it, it took me a while to really get, you know, to where I really was sold on these things. But they are super cheap. They are the cheapest things to maintain. There's just so many applications for these things. You stack them, and they do like 30 damage for hard and soft. Well, let's see here. So you go here. It's not a lot, right? So it's 4 and 6. But if you add that, so 5, 6 is 30. You know, a little over 30. And then 20 for soft targets, which is not a lot, but they're completely stealth. They got a crazy range. So basically, you have an aircraft mini stealth bomber version. They can launch cruise missiles. You know, they're completely stealth. They are really good at intel gathering, so they can reveal all the details of an army. So usually I'll always have a few of those in the area to run over top of my ground units to recon, you know, cities or any issues. Let's see. Do I have? I do have some here. Okay. So let's see here. Let me break off a stack here real quick for you guys. Make sure it's under 5. There we go. Let's patrol over here. So immediately you'll see once it lights up here. Anyway, they do what the recon vehicle does, but even better, where you put them over a city and it'll show everything, like all the details of the city, what stacks the enemy has, what's in the stacks, all that good stuff. Versus a lot of other recon, you don't get as much intel. On top of that, like I said, they have cruise missiles. They have a crazy range. Did I not select? Okay, I must have not. My bad. I'm tripping over here. Let's see. Apparently I can't talk and do shit at the same time. Patrol. There we go. Alright. So, come on. So you see they only have 25 HP, so they don't have a lot of HP, but they don't really need it because they're completely stealth. And these things, like, I mean, look at this range. You get you a carrier group with like 10 of these things on, like, you can just sit there and pepper the, like, yeah, you can penetrate an entire country just hitting targets, recon, you know, using the cruise missiles. And they're so cheap. That's the thing, is they're so cheap. So a very underutilized unit in my opinion. Definitely a really good tool to have in your toolbox, toolkit, whatever you want to call it. For the heavies, you have obviously your naval patrol aircraft. I haven't really used these. Once again, I'm not very big on specific or very specialized units. I like, you know, units I can use pretty much anywhere, and I can like max out and I can just mass produce those. But they're not bad in what they do, you know, just hunting submarines. But honestly, yeah, out of these, I would definitely say they're probably the most, or the worst. So you got your AWACS, your ground base. Now these, especially once you max them out, they can be really good for providing intel. Problem is, that's, you know, a whole line of resources and time you got to spend. You can only research 2 things at a time, so I don't usually go with these until it's like late game, and maybe if I do, I'll usually just go up to here and then branch off into the naval aircraft variant version. But usually I just use drones and mobile radar, honestly. They do a good enough job. Bombers. Bombers are very useful, especially early game. Basically, once you get around mid to late game, traditional bombers pretty much fall off as far as their usefulness. But stealth bombers are deadly. So a stack of 5 of these things, you can, and they have more range than the drones do. So you're talking like half the world basically you can access. So if you're in the Philippines, you can sit there and bomb Germany. You can send one of these, you know, stack of 5 of these guys, wipe an entire city, and like right before you hit the city, you can launch, because they each hold 3 cruise missiles. So you can literally launch 15 cruise missiles. So put it this way, a stack of these things with 1 or 2 passes, you can pretty much take out an entire country, if you know what you're doing, you know. But like, yeah, it's definitely possible. There's a lot of firepower, a lot of potential. They're totally stealth, like I said. Like, yeah, very, very deadly. I've held up against way stronger countries, more experienced players, many times using these things. Always going for the Homeland Cities. That's where you hit them the hardest. I'll hit that on later. But yeah. Anyway, moving on, naval. So, and I know I'm taking a lot more time than I want to for each of these. So, try to move a little faster. So, real quick, these are your cheapest units. The corvettes, they are good for basically one purpose and one purpose only. That's usually why I only level them up to level 1. Or only unlock them basically. And what I'll usually do with them is, they're good in shallow water. They're just horrible in deep water, right? But what you can do, which I don't know why my grids are off. Let's see here. There we go. So what you can do, and this is as good as time as any to cover this point. So in this game, there's routes you travel. The only thing that does not abide to routes are air units like missiles, aircraft, helicopters, stuff like that. But all naval and ground units all follow these routes, right? So knowing that, you can block off. So what I'll usually do is, you know, you'll get those cheap corvettes, and you'll put them here. And since they're good in shallow water, basically against everything, they can detect submarines, all that stuff. Put them on here, on each of the points of your entry to your cities, and put them on aggressive. And basically what that does is it makes it extremely hard. Basically, not technically, but it basically eliminates the probability of somebody surprising you, you know, you logging on and or I shouldn't say that, because if you're gone long enough, obviously they can take out the ship and continue on to your city. But it'll give you a warning, like it'll pop up, oh, you're getting attacked. They have to sit there and engage it for, you know, an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, depending, before they can move on to your city. So it gives you basically an early warning alert system. Very, very useful. More than just, you know, the ship itself attacking, right? So that's generally what I would use it for. You can deploy. It is the only ship that can actually deploy like drones and stuff. So In certain situations, it could be very, like if I was playing Philippines defensively, I might max these out, maybe. But yeah, frigates are really good against air. Not much else. These right here are basically the crux, or the kryptonite to any Air Force. So as someone who loves to play Air Force and almost always plays Air Force, this is about the only thing that if I see a stack of high levels, and they have to, you know, for the way I play, they have to be pretty much maxed before I'm really like in deep shit. But like if somebody plays a stack of these and they're maxed out, there's not a lot I can do, because they're really, like I said, naval units are more well-rounded. So most units are either really, like especially AA units, are really good against missiles, or they're good against aircraft, or you know, fixed wing or helicopters. Basically 3 different air threats, right? So generally what you can do if you have cruise missiles and aircraft, let's say they have really good aircraft AA, and so they're going to destroy you if you try to fly your aircraft in, well, you can just hit them with missiles, no problem. Vice versa, if they have really good missile defense, you can hit them with the aircraft. And the nice thing is in both scenarios, you can launch, if you have cruise missiles, which if you play Air Force, you should always have cruise missiles. You can launch a cruise missile ahead of you, trigger the attack, the AA attack action, which will, you know, hit the missile, but then it'll save you all, because missiles are one-time use anyway. So you hit that, and then you fly in with your aircraft and without getting hit, right? But you only have like 10 minutes to get in and get out, so you gotta make sure you time it and all that. But very, very useful. Frigates, however, they have really good missile and aircraft defense. So if once they get maxed out, especially if you get a maxed out stack of 5, like I basically at Air Force, it's about the only thing I can't touch. Now, obviously, I have other things to mitigate that, but it is definitely probably the biggest hurdle for an Air Force player is max level frigates. Destroyers, this is what generally most people run with because they're kind of a general purpose. A lot of people for some reason have this super irrational fear of submarines. I guess it's because they can't usually see them. But the amount of times I've actually seen people use submarines is like ridiculously low. So yeah, most people hardly ever use submarines, at least effectively or in mass. So I find, at least for me, I don't think I've ever come across somebody or any time playing this game where I was like, oh my god, like I am getting crushed by submarines or they're taking out my entire navy. Very, very, very rarely. And submarines, don't get me wrong, submarines can be super deadly if used correctly, but they are hardly ever used effectively. Alright, so moving on. Cruisers. They're kind of the best all around, but the most expensive. In my opinion, usually I'll go for cruisers just because, you know, instead of trying to invest in 2 different lines. You know, it's kind of a toss-up, honestly. Naval especially, there's so many, other than the corvettes, which are kind of, you know, very specialized, pretty much all these are very functional. Frigates, you could say they're a little bit more, definitely a little bit more specialized, but between destroyers, cruisers, you know, it's basically a destroyer is a cheaper version with a little bit better anti-submarine, and a cruiser is better. It can launch more missiles. It can, you know, better AA. Oh, that's another thing. Destroyers have horrible AA. So, what I love, one reason I love playing air support, or sorry, Air Force, is because most people will only go destroyers, right? Maxed out destroyer only has 4 points of fixed wing defense, right? And only 1.5. So that means max level stack of 5 destroyers. And I say max level, by the way, guys. I mean max as in max before you start getting negative debuffs, and we might go over a little bit more later, but basically you can get up to 5, and after that, every one that you add, you get a debuff, like you get slower, less, you know, attack. So if you're, most people are, you know, there's only very few instances where you would ever want to stack above 5. But yeah, let's say a max out stack of 5 of these, you know, I could easily hit them all day with my cruise missiles, because they don't have an attack either, so they can't do the initial attack. So very, very awesome to see this if you're going up against a player in your Air Force, which is generally like 90% of the people that have navies usually just have either corvettes or destroyers. I very, very rarely see anything else. I have been seeing a little bit more frigates, but not very often. And then aircraft carriers, my favorite. Now, this is definitely up for debate. The aircraft carriers are one of those things. They are expensive, and people will argue. You know, they're pretty much they're all experienced players are either on one side of the fence or the other. They're either like complete trash, not a waste. I mean, not complete trash, but at least not a waste. Not a good use of your time and resources. And then other players will swear by them. My opinion is if used correctly, once again, for active players, these can be one of the deadliest tools in your toolkit. Like, being able to hit a country, like, okay, that's one of the big things, you know, when people build defenses or, you know, and you're attacking a country, they will specifically set up so you have to go through choke points, you know, especially if they're experienced. And having an aircraft carrier where you can just hit them out of the middle of nowhere, with basically the entire Air Force, at least the way I play it, like, oh my god, it is huge. And aircraft carriers, so if you look at the cruisers, right, these, out of the normal ships, these have the highest health, right? You're looking at a health of, I'm not used to these up here, 75 points, right? Which is really good. That's actually pretty high, for pretty much any unit, right? I think that's maybe even like second or third highest of any unit. I'm trying to think of anything that has close to that other than aircraft carriers. But aircraft carriers maxed out. These things have 150, so double. So you put 2 of these things, and you're looking at 300 points. So even if these things were hot garbage at, well, let's take a look at them. So they have 5 points of attack and defense against fixed wing, which is it's not great, but it's not horrible either. They have 9 against helicopters, which is pretty good. They got 5 against missiles, which means if you have 2 of these, that's 10. If you had 3 of these in a stack, you're what I call cruise missile immune. So basically, I think the max health on a cruise missile is like 15 something, maybe 16. No, I think it's under 50. I'll have to check. But basically, there's a certain point where you get immunity from missiles, because if they shoot a missile at you, right, and your attack goes off and it destroys some of their health, that's all good, but it only does that once, and then it has to recharge for 10 minutes. And then they can just keep, you know, once they launch the initial one, they can keep launching. So what I always go for, or for me anyway, the more important stat in pretty much any unit is the defensive rating, right? Because that's the constant. That's the one that's tied to the unit to where no matter what, even in stealth, let's say I had, you know, F-35 stealth strike aircraft and I'm trying to hit somebody, even if I bypass all their AA and don't trigger their attack, you know, or attack stat, I still get hit with the defense. That's another reason I love mechanized infantry, because they have that really good defense. So no matter what hits them, they always, you know, they'll take a hit too, right? It's a trade-off. But if you get enough, defensive stats, and especially like cruise missiles here, you'll become immune to where my maxed out level cruise missiles cannot hit you. So I'm pretty sure, if I remember right, 3 of these aircraft carriers, of course, if you have other ships that can help out too, together will create that immunity that people cannot hit you with cruise missiles, because they'll just be destroyed, even if they get past the attack. So hopefully I can demonstrate a little bit better later on. But yeah, anyway, they have 5 against subs, defense, once again, which is not great, but not horrible. And 3 against ship, which is probably its weakest point. But the thing is they have so much goddamn health. So you have so much health that even a cruiser, let's say they have a maxed out cruiser, and they have an attack against, so the cruisers are the best against ships, right? They do 20 apiece. So if you have 5 maxed out cruisers, that's 100 points, right? So they'd have to hit you for 3 hours, basically 3 iterations, to take you out. Like that's if you had 3 aircraft carriers, or sorry, only 2. If you had 3, it'd be 450. So you had to hit you 4. So over basically 5 hours of hitting. That's on a normal vanilla, obviously, not 4 times rate. But yeah. So even if maybe say you're not doing the most damage to them, I mean, obviously you have planes and everything else to go with it, so you can sit there and attack them. But let's say you're offline and they try to hit your carrier group, you have so much health that they have to sit there for quite a while, and you can survive a lot longer. So aircraft carriers, in my opinion, are super useful, and I'll go ahead and show you my group I have over here. One thing I usually do is I run officers as my carrier group because they're so important. The carrier group, that is. What I'll generally do is I'll have 1 carrier group and maybe, let's say, like 3 ships, 3 aircraft carriers, and then like the naval captain and the submarine captain for speed and help out. But if you look at this, let's see, I'm trying to, once again, I'm not used to, oh, here's my boost. So my attack boost is 25%, defense 30%, speed 25%. That's just for the ships alone. Let's see, click on, okay, that's not what I meant to do. Cycle cell made it. Okay. Like I said, I don't really play on the computer that much. It's just easier to record. So, where is? Oh, that's it. I feel like it's right in front of my face. I just click here. Oh, okay, that's right. Yeah, I don't click anywhere. It just pops up. All right. So basically, as you can see here, I have almost 30 on attack and defense for fixed wing, 40 for helos. I got 22 for missiles, which is more than enough for immunity because ballistic missiles cannot hit objects in the water or moving targets. Cruise missiles are the only ones that can track and hit moving or water targets. So basically, no missiles can touch me. I do 50 against ships. So that's pretty good. That's not a crazy amount, but it's definitely enough to make someone think twice before they hit me. I do 45 against subs, which have a lot lower health, so that's actually pretty good. And yeah, the rest is not a big deal. And then if you look right here, I have, oh yeah, here we go, HP of 585, so almost 600 points, which is crazy amount, like, yeah, of HP. So a good aircraft carrier group, and I'm not going to go into the details. I'm going to save that for my next video, where I break it down, all the tactics and the crazy things you can do. Oh, one thing I will say real quick, one of the tricks is, so you see how I have the city right here with airport? If I had airborne unit, or pretty much any air assault units in the water here, let's say I had them stacked with my thing, and my ships, and I was coming in, I can actually launch them from the water. Now you can't launch them from the land of the water, but you can launch them from the water. So I could literally have them sitting out here hiding, and let's say they had a radar or something on here, and I knew it, and I could use that. I could be like, okay, I'm not going to send my troops into there; they'll see them. I could have them out here and literally air assault them in, and I'll demonstrate that. Actually, you know what? Can I? Oh yeah, I should be able to demonstrate. Well, no, I won't be able to demonstrate in time. It's going to take too long. But that's a really good trick. Good thing to know. Let's see, a quick, oh my god, this is taking way too long. Alright, submarines, I won't go into depth on these things, but I will say that submarines are very useful in very specific circumstances. I almost always go with ballistic subs. I get it, they're not as good against subs or ships, but I don't use, the only reason I use ships or subs against surface targets is as barricades or early warning systems, in which case these work just fine. But the reason I like these is, so once you get the maxed out of these, you can launch 2 cruise missiles or 5 ballistic missiles. So these are basically, excuse me, these are my contingency or my ballistic missile platforms, which is really cool because you can park one or two of these things offshore of, you know, a country, like way offshore, because ballistic missiles have a really, well, here, I'll show you actually. So launch a missile. So your average, because this is a conventional cruise missile range, but this isn't quite maxed out, I don't think. Well, yeah, that's about how far you're looking at with a cruise missile, right? A little bit further, I think, if it's maxed out. For a, why isn't it showing me? Oh, I'm retarded. I forgot. I usually have subs in my stack, but I didn't this time. So let's go ahead and launch from here. So, conventional ballistic missile. We gotta zoom way out to see this. So, and that's not maxed out either. That's like, I think, level 1 or level 2. So it'll go like all the way out here to Iran, pretty much. Maybe not quite that far, but pretty far. So you can pretty much cover an entire country just sitting offshore. And anytime you want, you can just hit them, which is really cool. So that's very important. Also, obviously, goes along with having warheads stocked up, and we'll go into that later. All right, moving on now to missiles. So, real quick, conventional warheads is basically all you need. I won't go into all the details, but basically the two factors for not getting any higher than conventional is cost. And I mean actual cost of making them, but then also you have to have such high level buildings to make nukes, like the labs. Normally, if you just play with conventional, you only need a level 1 lab. If you make nukes, you have to have level 5, and those things, you know, that's another building. You have to max out all the resources that go into that. So already it's, you know, it's iffy at best, right? But then on top of that, using chem weapons or nukes, or nuclear weapons, will negatively affect your morale, right? So basically, if you go into this and you're like, oh, because I've seen people do that, like, I'm just gonna work on nukes, and it's like, okay, cool, you have nukes, but if you use more than like 5 of them, which, you know, they're cool, they do like if you hit a city, it'll pretty much eliminate most everything in that city, but once you use like 5 or so of them, you start getting a really negative debuff on all, like, you'll have entire countries you taking over that start to rebel. The rebels start taking over cities. Like, your morale drops, thereby your economy drops because it's tied directly to your economy. It just, I've literally seen people pretty much just wipe themselves out by using nukes, especially nukes, but, you know, also chemical weapons. So they're really a double-edged sword, and they're not really useful. Like, honestly, like, you can do almost as much, I mean, not quite, but you can do a decent amount of damage with conventional. So in my opinion, don't ever touch nukes or chems. Unless it's like super late game and you just need that edge. Or if you're playing, let's say you're playing on a group of 5 other people and you know everybody, like personally know everybody in the team, and they got your back, and they're like, we want one guy to go nukes, that way, you know, we have that tool to, you know, either threaten or use against somebody. Then, you know, that's the only time I could really see nukes being a thing. But cruise missiles, in my opinion, are definitely the most useful. Ballistics are pretty good enough that I usually try to get them every match. But my main focus is cruise missiles because you can launch them from planes, ships, ground, submarines, like bombers. You can launch, like, they're just so universal. Alright, moving on to officers. Basically, these are the only things that are affected by your level, right? So as a level 42, whatever the hell I am, I can get, you know, pretty high, definitely not maxed out anything, but pretty high level officers. Basically, what officers do is in general, they are more multi or well-rounded unit type. So, for example, like the fixed-winged officer, he's basically a cross between a strike aircraft and air superiority. Like, he has better stats in each, but not quite as good in some. So he's well balanced. So if, let's say, you're running air superiority fighters, and that's your thing, having him will give you a little bit more ground attack capabilities if you have him in the stack, along with obviously the bonuses. So the higher level they are, the more army boost. So for me, this is I think a level 1, so it's 15% attack bonus and 10% speed. And then if you have a helicopters, which I don't know why you would, but if you do, that'd be a 10% buff for this helicopter speed. So officers, very useful. They are quite expensive. You only get one of each. So, you know, something to keep in mind. I usually only go for the navals. I usually only go for these last 4. They're only the really ones that are useful. And the big one is the submarine and the naval, because this thing speeds up your aircraft carrier group, which obviously when you need it, like, I mean, that's really good. You can basically with this, at what I can do with my level, I can get to where I think I can pretty much outrun, I think I got like a 4.4 or 4.5 speed, which means I can either keep up with or outrun basically any other ships. And that's as a carrier group with everything else, not just, you know, just these. So that means if I'm trying to run away from somebody or trying to keep up with somebody or just trying to get somewhere to help out an ally or whatever, I can, you know, I can get there a lot faster. So very, very important. Always keep your carrier groups moving if you're in an active match, or at least if you can. Moving on, so these are the seasonal units. These are kind of OP mostly, but they're limited. So like, you know, these, for instance, the railguns, I would say are probably the most OP things you can get. Now you have to have them unlocked, which means you had to play in that season. So for some of you guys, you may never have access. That's why, even though I use them a decent amount, I don't usually talk about them, or I'm probably not going to talk too much about them in my tutorials, because I know a lot of you guys probably don't even have access to them. But they are really good. Pretty much they're artillery against everything, and they're AA, so they're really good. They're air assault, like they're just, yeah, they're pretty evil. But you can only get a limited amount of them. So I think for me, I only get like 10 or so now. These bombers are really cool because they're the only ones, only planes that can launch ballistic missiles. Problem is they're not stealth, so you know, mid to late game they're really vulnerable. But ballistic missiles from these things, you know, it can be really useful. The drones and the elite swarms are pretty good. You can unlock, I think the drones right now, there's another like around 30 days left to unlock these. So I would definitely work on that if you can. And these I think were last season. But basically these are the two things that you can get by getting the supplies. And you can deploy from, you know, infantry, ships, like not everything, but pretty much every category of units has 1 or 2 units that can deploy either one, or I think Special Force can actually deploy both. So these can be definitely good multipliers, and they're actually, especially the swarm, they're actually, or the drone swarm, they're actually pretty deadly. They are a one-off though, but they are pretty deadly. So good shit right there. Oh, one thing I should mention real quick is the fact that be very, like, obviously the first time you play, I'm not expecting anybody to, you know, to go in depth and see exactly what each thing requires, but just keep in mind that a lot of these units, especially the seasonal units, but a lot of these units require, the higher level you level them up, the more expensive they are to build, and then some of them, a lot of them require higher level buildings as well. I shouldn't say a lot of them, some of them require higher level buildings as well. So obviously you want to keep a balance, because if you build too many units at the beginning, then you override your resources, and before you know it, everybody else is outproducing you, and you're just basically stuck, and yeah, you're pretty much fucked. But if you so just keep that in mind. So basically, you know what you need to build each one, and before you research, you know, a next level of a unit, make sure you see what it needs to be able to build it and everything like that. Okay, I think that's pretty much all. I know this is taking way longer than I expected. I apologize, but honestly, I just want to get all the information I can out there for you guys. So let's go ahead and move into something that a lot of people don't know about, and I'm actually still experimenting with, so I am not going to pretend like I am an expert in any way, but I will show you the basics. Now, bear in mind, I'm used to the mobile version, so this is totally different for me. But basically the spy system. So I'm not gonna waste too much time on this, but I will say, Spies can be useful. Basically, you pay for, I guess you call them agents. You pay for an agent up front, $10,000, and they sit, unless you basically you buy them or train them, whatever you want to call it. You create them for 10,000, and then you can deploy them in enemy or even friendly territory. If you do not deploy them, if they're just sitting idle, then they don't take resources per day. If I remember correctly. But if you do deploy them, they do take a certain amount of money every day. But what you can do is you can get intel. So basically, you put them in a city or anywhere in the country. Like if I was trying to spy on India, I could go here, and I could click. There should be an intel. Excuse me. Let's see. Just click here. Okay, yeah, there we go. So, for example, I recruit for 10,000. I recruit one agent. So I have an agent available. Now, the mobile version, you can just directly recruit them for intel, whatever. But here, I guess you recruit them and then you deploy them. But I can put them for intelligence, which, in my opinion, is basically the only use for these things. Corruption or sabotage. So corruption, you can bring down the morale, and sabotage is obviously you can hurt buildings and stuff. Very specific situations, like if maybe you're trying to take out an airport, that might be the way to go. The one thing I am trying to test is, so you can do counter agents, right? That help. Basically, I can put counter agents in my main cities to keep other people from using agents against me, and it definitely does work. But what I am still trying to figure out is I've done a decent amount of testing where I put agents in countries that didn't have either AI or if I'm running the other country with like my friend's account or whatever, so that way I can test it. They still, even if the other person has no anti-agents or counter agents, a lot of times your agents still will get discovered. It's kind of random. It's a little weird. You can only deploy 3 agents per city or region. So if you really need intel, right? If you really need it, what I always do is deploy at least 2, if not 3 agents. That way, because they don't usually catch more than one. I don't think they ever catch more than one at a time. So at the very worst, you'll get at least 3 days of intel, whatever. So they can be useful. I don't want to talk too much about them because honestly, I'm not an expert on them. But that is the basics. Let's see real quick. Oh, so resources. Resource management is a big thing. So a lot of people get in and they immediately want to build like a big army, blah blah blah, and next thing they know, they're making peas, and they're just everybody's outdoing them. So there's basically there's I guess 2 main strategies when it comes to resources. So you can either work on managing your military. If you're an active player like me, you don't have to have as many units because you can move them around and attack where you need to. Or you can do what most people do, and they just keep pushing. So they're constantly taking more territories, more resource cities, and they're just expanding. The problem is with that is you can a few things with that. One, you can overexpand to where you make yourself super vulnerable, and anybody that with half a brain can come in and just take a huge chunk out of you and really just hurt you a lot. And then especially if that's what your economy is riding on, then and you can't defend it well because it's so big, then yeah, it can definitely mess you up. And it's kind of I'm not sure what you call it, but basically to be able to protect that much territory, obviously you need more troops, and then the more troops you have, the more territory you have to take for more resources. So it's kind of it kind of kills itself there. So basically what I usually do is at the beginning of the game I'll push. So let's say Philippines is not a really good example because it's really hard to push with Philippines, but let's say I was Israel, right? Actually, I'm playing a match right now where I'm Israel. Right here. So if I was Israel, and now this is a little bit different obviously since it's a private match, so Israel usually has more cities, but I would immediately, as soon as I get in the game, I'd push Damascus, I'd push here, I'd push maybe here, probably not as much, but definitely push up through here and take out Syria. One, because they are generally the biggest threat early game, but also because I'm just at the initial start. You pretty much have to take at least some territory. You have to take to win this game. You can't. I've tried it. I was definitely that person when I started playing where I was like, oh, I'm just gonna sit here under the radar, build up everything, have nukes, have stealth, all this stuff, and then just hit them. But the problem is at a certain level, they can just so far outproduce you that it doesn't matter what you have. They can just keep throwing more at you, and they can pinpoint you, which is not good. To where they can focus all their units and stuff on one area. Blockade you and all that stuff. So you definitely have to expand. So what I usually do is, instead of keep expanding all the game, I might take like here, I might take all Syria, take this obviously, probably take Egypt more than likely. So for example, let's say by day 30, if I had it my way and I could do it how I wanted, I'd probably have Egypt, Saudi Arabia, basically this whole peninsula, here, maybe Turkey, and all through up here, right? Which seems like a lot, right? But in the grand scale of things, it's not actually that much. So what you want to do is you want to get enough to where you can build up your resources, and then like you take some territory and then you stop. And you just work on research, developing your cities, work on your military, get everything up and going. Basically, you're getting yourself to where you have a good enough economy to compete. And then you let everybody else kill each other, right? So everybody else is out here doing wars. And that kind of hits on another point that a lot of people don't realize is, for every single war that you do, there's a slight negative that applies to every single territory, every single city that you own, right? So if I go here, let's see, how does this go again? Okay. So once again, I'm not used to the PC version. Buildings effects. Where does it say it? Defense, morale. Is it? Daily corruption. Okay, I feel like it's right in front of me. But anyway, basically, on the mobile version, it's a lot more obvious. But basically, for every war, there'll be a stat, and it'll say, like, you are in 6 wars, 7 wars, whatever. Once you get to like 10 wars, you are talking, you're starting to get a huge negative debuff on all your morale and all your territories and cities, to where the only way you can really combat it is by building hospitals on territories and bunkers in your cities, which obviously a lot more resources go into that, which is fine. Like I do, like, I build bunkers because there's other reasons to build them, but even when you build out those, you're not getting the same growth. And once you get more than like, I think like 15 or so, you have to have pretty much maxed out buildings, maxed out bunkers to combat that and bring up your morale to 100. I think if I remember right, anything, I'll have to, once again, this is something for my more advanced video, but I think it's around 15 or so different wars that you're in, and you're pretty much never going to get 100. So what I always do is I very carefully pick my battles. I make sure I can take the country. I'm still learning exactly how you eliminate a war. Like, so I know, for example, on this match, because I'm not playing with any real players, when I take, let's say I take this country right here, if I take it quickly and I take everything in there, it'll be war, like it'll count as a war, a negative debuff for as long as I'm at war with them, but as soon as I take everything, it goes away, or at least like the next day. So the only thing I know is that it seems to work pretty much every time if you're going up against the AI country, but I've had mixed results when it's going against humans. So like, let's say for instance, I'm the US, or I am the US in this one, but let's say I'm going against Russia, right, in this late game, and we're all out brawling, and I take out Russia, right? Or actually, that's a bad example. So let's say it's mid-game, I take out India. Well, India quits, right? They leave. But unless he's like super cool, which most likely he's not going to be that cool, I've only seen it like maybe once, he's not going to forgive me and accept my, my peace proposal. So that means for the rest of the entire game, that's a negative war that goes on my list, because he's always going to be at war with me. Now, it seems like there are circumstances where it will go away, and I'm not sure if there's like, maybe if they have one unit somewhere that you missed, or how exactly that works. I'm still learning that. But I do know that it's, at least in my experience, like 70%, 80%, probably like 80% of the time, that war is going to stick as a negative debuff on your list. So that means if I sit here and I try to go to war with every single country around me, I'm going to, I'm going to be stuck at like 60, 70% morale. Everything will be down. My training will be slower. My resource production will be lower. All that. So what I'll usually do, like I said, is I'll pick a few countries, usually like maybe 3 or 4, and make sure I know, what resources I need, which ones are more of a threat, which one would be more advantageous, all that good stuff. Analyze them, and then I attack them, and I try to take out one at a time. If I need to, I'll attack multiple, but usually I try to focus on one, get everything taken out. Especially early game when you first log in. My strategy is when you first log in, always hit the AIs like before anybody, because they're a lot more vulnerable when the AI. So for example, AI usually doesn't launch planes, like they won't be flying, right? And when planes are on the ground, they can't do anything basically. So if I can join in as Israel, and I immediately attack Damascus with my plane and start sending troops, I can usually pretty much wipe all his forces in Damascus before a player even logs in and it's like, oh, I want to play Syria. And then they log in and they're already like, I know it's kind of crap for them, but the nice thing is at that point you can negotiate. You can say, well, I didn't know you were going to join, which is kind of a shitty excuse, but it is true in some ways where, you didn't know a real player, because not all matches fill up. And so you could be like, I was attacking him because he was NPC, and a lot of times people will be like, oh, okay. And then you can either give it back or keep the city and, go to peace or whatever. Or if they do want to be combative and they're like, F you, blah, 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 you already have, a huge advantage on them, and you already took out, a big chunk of their forces. You already got a jump start. So even if they're like, okay, they're going to try to defend and attack you, it's going to take them time to bring forces in. By that time, you already took the city, you're already defending it, which whenever you defend a city, you get a buff. Just in case you didn't know that, the higher level bunkers you have, the more buff you get. So yeah, it's definitely important to attack NPC countries early on. Alright, let's see, what else have we not covered? Oh, city building. Alright, so cities, you go in, obviously you can build or recruit. It doesn't really matter which one you click, because honestly you can go to the next one. Obviously little different than a mobile version. But here are the basic buildings. You got the Army base, you got Air base, Naval base. Well, I'm not going to name them all because you can see them. Basically what you need to know is Army bases, a lot of people, a lot of players, including experienced players, will tell you build an army, like first thing, build an army base, at least level 1 on every single town that you own. And that is a valid plan if you're mass producing, basic infantry, and you're just trying to push, and you're doing that whole, tanks and infantry, blah, 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 which most people do. However, there's a few things you got to consider when doing this. So one is the Army base is one of the few, I shouldn't say one of the few, but it's one of the buildings that doesn't really do anything positive for you except for unlocks, the ability to build certain units, right? So, and it costs, it costs a decent amount of money for upkeep, especially early on in the game. If you build one of these in every single city, well, you're already talking about, a couple hundred, or almost, depending on how many cities you have, a decent chunk of money coming out of your economy right off the bat. Now, that might be worth it if you're actually using them, but if you're not, like me, I don't hardly ever use them, so I never build a army base in every city. I might build an army base in 2 cities at max. At the beginning, and then eventually later on when my economy is established, then yes, I'll go back and I'll build these. But unless you really need them, basically what it comes down to, if you don't need to, don't build army bases. So if you compare like an army base to an airport, I'm losing my voice here. Airport, they boost your production, right? So they can literally boost your production all the way up to 25%. So not only do they unlock units, not only do they provide a huge strategic advantage, and actually I'll go over this now since I brought up airports, but airports in my opinion are one of the single like unused tools or whatever you want to call it that most people just either don't, they don't use or they forget about or whatever. But whenever I analyze a country, let's say it's later in the game and I'm thinking about taking Turkey, if I go here and I see that this guy has airports in every single city, that is like one of the biggest things that makes me stop and be like, maybe I shouldn't attack. Because when you think about it, especially if he's in an alliance, or sorry, a coalition with other players, not only can he move troops, I should say, first of all, not only does that mean he probably has the Air Force, right? So I have to worry about that. But on top of that, let's say I do a little recon and I see that he's light on troops here, and I'm like, I'm going to attack here. If he has airports everywhere, he could have, let's say he has a huge stack of troops right here, he can move here, at least if he's, if he gets on in any decently amount of time, he can move all his troops from here to here in time to defend, and I'm screwed. He can move them all over the place. Not only that, but his allies, as soon as I attack, more than likely he's going to ask for help. So his allies can fly in troops, which you can literally go from being dominant and having being like, okay, I got this, to like a day later and you're just overwhelmed, and now you pissed off an entire alliance who has half their freaking troops in this dude's territory, and they're all coming for you, and then all of a sudden you're in a defensive war instead of offense. And so airports, in my opinion, are one of the single biggest things you got to watch out for, and that you want. So whenever I attack a country, I almost always try to target the airports, take out the airports first. Obviously, if they have an air force and you take out their airports, their air force, depending on the situation, so what generally happens is their aircraft will go to the next nearest airport. But if the airport's far away, then you basically eliminated their air force. That's another reason why I say strike aircraft are better, because there are so many ways that you can deal with air superiority fighters, like taking out the airport that they use. You can bait them by sending like one drone or one aircraft, and then they'll destroy it and then go back to their base, and then you hit them while they're on the ground refueling and they can't do anything. You can there's a lot of different ways you can deal with air superiority fighters, which is why, in my opinion, they're generally not worth the resources and time. But all that being said, airports are very important. They produce resources. They're a positive building. They're not a negative, draining building like the barracks. So that's one reason I go Air Force. That's one reason I usually build an airport in every city in my homeland. Homeland cities, real quick. Homeland cities are very, very important. They produce double the amount, if I remember right, double the amount of resources than even, like, people are like, oh, if I get this city, then I'm going to annex it. Even annexed cities only get half the amount of a, and generally not even that, but a maxed out annexed city versus a maxed out homeland city, there's no competition. So homeland cities are very important. That's why if I'm ever going up against, especially like an experienced player or someone who's like really doing really good in the game, I don't usually even try to go for like other cities and stuff that he has, even if they're close by to me. I'll go straight for his homeland cities, because yeah, he might be able to, he might use his close cities to hit me, but in the end, like, I'll do so much more damage and cripple him so much more, because once I hit him, obviously I lose that element of surprise. So you always want to hit their homeland cities first if you can. Obviously you want to defend them better too. Let's see. So going back into buildings, naval bases, they also have a positive effect. So They produce not as much as airports, but they do actually help produce resources as well. So unlike the barracks, once again, they're a positive building. Recruiting offices are basically they speed up your recruit time, right? And they allow you obviously to make different units. And they also increase your what's this called? Manpower. So manpower is one resource that you'll need for all your units except for missiles, excuse me, and supplies. And so it's one thing you have to keep in mind and balance. That's how you get it. Recruiting office. A lot of people they know that, but they don't realize that it actually speeds up the production time of the units as well. A lot of people, if they just literally clicked on the buildings and read a little bit, they would learn a lot. Arms industry, obviously it boosts your resource production, which is one of the most important buildings in the game. And they also give you, so obviously they're a positive building by nature, but on top of that they're also double positive because they actually give you money as well. So really good building to have. Weapons lab. So this is one of the ones that I was talking about. If you get nukes and you have to have this pretty much maxed out, which is a lot of resources to do. So what I usually do is, if you're getting cruise missiles and ballistic missiles, literally all you need, well, because it only goes for warheads, for building warheads for your missiles, right? Which I should explain that now, I guess. So all your missiles basically come in two parts. So you got your warheads, the actual explosive, and then you have the missile types or levels that you research. So if I go here and I research, I guess I researched the other ones already, but if I researched a cruise missile level 1, right, I don't have to build cruise missile bodies level 1, right? I just have those available. Unlimited supply, but what I do have limited are the warheads. So as you can see up here, I have 12 warheads. Depending on, like, if I use a nuke, a maxed out nuke, I might have to use, I think it's 4 or 5 of these at one time for just one nuke. Well, obviously it'd be this right over here, not conventional, but you get what I'm saying. Basically, even for like cruise missiles, a level 1 is 1 warhead. And then once you get to mid, I think it's like 2, and I think maxed out it's 3 warheads or something like that. And then ballistic starts, I think, at 2. But yeah, so basically you're just producing these, and to do that you only need a level 1. As soon as you go chem or nuke, though, you need higher. So it's nice, you never have to upgrade these higher than level 1 if you do it that way. Military hospitals, so basically what these do is they heal your units. So obviously you don't waste resources on building these on every city. They do boost the population growth rate, which is nice, but they also cost. So kind of like the barracks, they are a negative in that way. But what I usually do is, I'll put these in specific cities I'm using as FOBs or military outposts to heal my units, but use these sparingly. And then obviously headquarters. So headquarters is basically like your, headquarters, or you put it where your capital is. The one thing a lot of people don't know is that your morale is affected by these within a certain level. So like, it's not as applicable here in Israel because it's such a small country. So every single one of my homeland cities is, is affected. But since I'm playing US right here, I always make my capital St. Louis, because the positive ring, the bonus effect of morale, and I could be wrong on this, but I'm pretty sure that's how it works, is there's like basically an area of effect, and if I had it where it starts out over here in Washington, then it doesn't affect these coastal cities near as much. Plus, obviously, you want to keep it safe. And being in the middle is, a lot safer. Nobody can invade it directly. So that is pretty much most of the buildings. Oh, annexing country or cities, I should say. A lot of people get this wrong, where they take over a city. Oh wait, my bad. Build. See if I have a city I have. So this is a little bit different because I don't have to worry about enemies. I'm just literally taking my good old time and annexing cities, because it does give you more resources, but it's so expensive. Trying trying to find a city that I haven't annexed yet. Let's see, maybe one of these in Australia? Come on. No. Anyway, long story short, annexing cities is extremely expensive. Extremely. And yes, it does boost production and give you the ability to recruit units from said city, but at least for me, 90% of the time I never even need to recruit. Like, I'm always recruiting from home because it's way faster, it's way safer. Like, I never try to, I shouldn't say never, but very, very rarely do I ever need to or want to recruit units from cities I take over. So in my opinion, unless you're super established, let's say you've taken your, your 3 countries or whatever, and there's super powerful people all around you, and you can't do, you can't really expand without pissing them off and getting in trouble, then yeah, you could annex a few cities, get some more resources, but it costs so much that you just be very, very mindful of that when you do that. And the ability to recruit troops usually is not a big enough bonus to make it worth it, because you can still take troops there, you can still heal troops if you have a, well, you can heal them regardless, but if you have a hospital, you can heal them faster. You can still have an airport, you can have allies fly in, you can do all that stuff. The only thing you can't do is you can't actually make new units from that city, which, like I said, once again, is usually not an issue. Let's see, what else? There's obviously the news system. I'm not going to go too much of this. This is not necessarily as game crucial. Obviously, politics, making friends, all that stuff is a good way, and I'm going to go into a lot more detail on that. Tricks, tips. Oh, I will say one thing: gold. So I know a lot of people frown on using gold at all. That's fine, but I will say that if you intend to buy any gold at all, which I honestly don't mind because it's a free. I mean, I'm not going to use it in excess, obviously, but I don't mind the idea of people using at least some gold sparingly. Now, I do definitely, well, I'll show you a little later where they, in my opinion, they do have two OP things that you can do with gold that, in my opinion, are really stupid. But I think, supporting the developers in this way, honestly, for a free-to-play game, or in my opinion, a really good game, and a game unlike, pretty much anything else out there, it's worth it to me to give them a little bit every once in a while. But all that being said is, if you plan on buying gold, get it on the desktop version, like on the browser or Steam, because you get a lot more gold for, like, if I pay $10 for gold on my phone, I get way less. Well, actually, you know what? I'll pull it up right now, just so I can be 100% accurate. But I did in my breakdown video. Actually, you know what? I'll wait till that. In my breakdown video, I have the exact numbers for each one, and then every so often they have like a 20% sale where you can do that. So if I do ever buy it, I'll wait for the 20%, and then I'll pick up a little bit on the browser. And you do all three of those, you get so much. I mean, obviously, in my opinion, it's still a little bit expensive for what you get, but it's actually, not near as bad at that point, because you actually get a decent amount of gold for the money you spend. Versus if you just get it on mobile, like, without the sale, without getting it on a browser, you're paying the same amount of money for way less gold. Like, I'm talking thousands in a lot of cases. So, let's see, is there anything else that's super important? I know this is a super long video, and I apologize. There's so much more. I have like a whole PowerPoint with all these graphs. I'm going to break down, exactly both sides of the scenario whenever you attack with, like, let's say, for example, if I have my aircraft attacking this city and they have AA, what it looks like for the defenders and me at the same time. At what point can you pick them up on radar? What level radar? Strategies, stacking, what stacking combinations are the best, strategies, how to bait, how to fool radar. Well, not necessarily fool, but how to, stuff like that. A lot of different tricks I've learned You know, a lot of them the hard way, but you know, I know for me the missile immunity is something I had to learn really the hard way, because I think my first game I played Australia, and I was like, oh, if I get cruise missiles, because this guy kept attacking me with ships, I was like, I'll just take him out, and I kept sending missile after missile. I was like, why aren't, like, even when they get past his main attack, they still would never actually do any damage. Now, what I didn't realize is, because he had such good missile AA, or missile defense, my missiles didn't have enough health, and so they would just, you know, dissipate before they even hit him. And I just wasted a whole bunch of resources and missiles trying to, you know, constantly hit them. So understanding basics like that, you know, yeah, the list could go on. As you can probably gather by now, I really love this game. There's so much about it that, like, to me, it's, I mean, honestly, I don't know of any other game that does this, where you can play a real country, which in my opinion is awesome, because people get so much more invested. Like, I mean, I just started a new match recently, and people are already, I'm playing as Israel, partly because I love trolling people, but but it's funny, I'm already getting, you know, hate messages, you know, F Israel, blah blah blah, people not wanting to ally with me specifically just because I'm Israel, even though I'm not, you know, Israeli, calling me baby killers and all that. You know, it brings out something in people which is really interesting, and can make it really a fun experience. In general, I find that, you know, a Chinese person usually plays China, which ends up, you know, with them trying to make some outlandish claims, you know, claim the South China Sea, even though there's really nothing to claim. Or, I mean, well, it kind of is, but not, you know, or Taiwan or whatever. And it's just, you know, people get up in the news and they make these all, like, you know, basically role play and stuff. So it can get really interesting. My advice is, at least at the beginning, don't pop up on the radar too much. You don't want, like, I purposely do it now because I'm looking for a challenge, because it's, you know, been a few games before it's been quite a while since I've actually had a challenge. Generally what I find is around mid game or so, most people end up quitting, and I'm just stuck, you know, trying to flog it out, trying to get enough territories. Oh, I should have covered that for points. For winning, it takes victory points. So you get a certain amount depending on your coalition. For every member you have in your coalition, it takes a little bit more. Obviously, you get more if you have them too, but basically to make up for that, so 5. So basically, I mean, it's still easier. Just how do you say? It's still easier, obviously, because you have people to work with stuff. Winning as an alliance or a coalition, but the game at least tries to balance it. Where if you're playing by yourself, you know, you only have to get a certain amount of victory points. So at least there's a chance for you winning. If you click on the cities. Let's see if it says here. Once again, I'm used to the mobile version. Oh yeah, here we go. It'll say how many victory points, so that way you know, if you're attacking a territory or city, you know how many victory points it's going to get. Victory points. So let's say I got all the victory points. People would still have to the end of the day. So right now it's 09:41 in the day. So they basically have an entire, I mean, it's basically, you know, 9 in the morning, or basically almost 10 o'clock in the morning in this game day. So they have basically the rest of the day to try to take out enough victory points where I don't win at the end of the day, right? Or maybe they have more or something like that. So just keep that in mind. If you get enough victory points, you do have to hold that to the end of the day to be claimed the winner. Man, there's so much else in this game. I could go on and on and on. Different strategies for different countries, what countries are, you know, why the U.S. is an amazing country to play, not just, you know, because I'm biased, because I am from the U.S., but, you know, the way the cities are built and all that stuff, and the differences between playing small and large countries and all that stuff. But I will hopefully get out the video by the end of the year. I'm going into a deep dive on all the units. I'm getting the stats. I'm getting graphs to make it easy for people to, you know, visually see exactly what units are best, and, you know, what they're best for, and all that good stuff. But yeah, until then, I will see you guys later. thank you so much for taking all this amount of time out of your day to watch it. Hopefully it was it helped you out. Especially, I really want to make this video because I haven't seen, like, I mean, there's definitely a few videos out there. There's a few people that make a decent amount of content on this game, but for the most part, well, honestly, it's kind of random, like the video I just made. So that's one reason I want to make a super structured a video where you have sections, and if you want to learn about naval warfare, you can go to, you know, the 5th section and blah blah blah, and it's broken down into you know, very understandable. I won't be completely scripted on the video, but it will be like I'll have rough scripts. That way I stay in, you know, stay in context. I'm not rambling all over the place. I want to make it very precise and easy and the best way explained possible. So hopefully y'all are looking forward to that. I hope y'all have an amazing day and have fun and go out and conquer some territories and win. Peace, guys. Bye.